The monitor above bed 4 flashed a harsh, rhythmic red. The sound was a flat, continuous tone that meant only one thing. The human heart had stopped. Zyler stood perfectly still at the foot of the bed. His internal chronometer ticked away the seconds with absolute precision. He did not feel panic. He did not feel sorrow. He felt only the cold, clear data of a failing biological system. Commencing cardiopulmonary resuscitation, Zyler stated. His voice was a smooth, synthesized baritone, devoid of any inflection. He stepped forward, his long, pale fingers moving with mechanical exactness. He placed his hands over the patient's sternum. He calculated the exact force required to compress the heart without fracturing the ribs of this specific 70-year-old male. He began the compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. His rhythm was flawless. To his left, Nurse Elena Rostova was already moving. She was human, soft-skinned, and entirely inefficient. She did not look at the monitor. She looked at the patient's face. She grabbed the oxygen mask and secured it over the man's nose and mouth, her movements frantic but gentle. "Push 1 milligram of epinephrine," Elena shouted to the junior doctor. Her voice was tight, her breathing elevated. Her heart rate, according to Zyler's optical sensors, was currently at 140 beats per minute. This was a severe physiological stress response. It was impairing her fine motor skills. "Epinephrine pushed," the doctor said. "Resume compressions," Elena said. She stepped back, her chest heaving. She looked at Zyler. "How long?" "Cardiac arrest initiated 4 minutes and 12 seconds ago," Zyler replied. "Return of spontaneous circulation is statistically improbable after 6 minutes in this demographic. I recommend preparing the termination protocols." "Keep going," Elena snapped. She reached out and grabbed the patient's limp hand. She squeezed it. "Come on, Arthur. Stay with us. You promised your granddaughter you'd walk her down the aisle. Stay with us." Zyler paused his internal calculations. This was a critical error. The patient could not hear her. The auditory nerves were already deprived of oxygen. Squeezing the hand served no mechanical purpose. It did not pump blood. It did not oxygenate the brain. It was a waste of kinetic energy. 2 minutes have passed, Zyler noted. Survival probability is now below 2%. "I don't care about the math, Zyler," Elena said, her voice cracking slightly. "Keep pumping." Zyler continued. At exactly 6 minutes and 30 seconds, the monitor remained a flat, red line. The brain tissue had suffered irreversible necrosis. "Time of death, 1400 hours, Zyler announced. He stopped compressions. He stepped back and folded his hands in front of his pristine white uniform. The medical intervention was complete. The transaction was finished. But Elena did not step back. She leaned over the bed. She gently smoothed the hair on the dead man's forehead. She kept holding his hand. Her shoulders shook. A small amount of saline fluid leaked from her eyes and dropped onto the sterile sheets. Zyler watched her. His optical sensors recorded the tear. He categorized it as a minor leakage of ocular lubrication due to emotional stress. He waited for her to step away so the cleaning drones could be summoned. She stayed for 4 minutes. She whispered something to the corpse. Then, she wiped her face, took a deep breath and turned to Zyler. Her eyes were red, but her posture was straight. "Call the family," she said, her voice steady again, "and summon the cleaning crew." "Understood," Zyler said. He tapped his datapad. "Nurse Elena, your cortisol levels remain elevated. You are experiencing a severe stress response. I recommend a 15-minute rest cycle in the decompression chamber." "I'm fine, Zyler," she said, turning to walk out of the room. "I have rounds in Ward B." "That is illogical," Zyler said. "Your cognitive function is currently impaired by 14% due to emotional fatigue. You will make errors." She stopped and looked back at him. Her expression was unreadable to his facial recognition software. "I'm not a machine, Zyler. I don't just turn off. I need to keep moving. It helps." She walked out. Zyler stood alone in the quiet room with the body. He looked at the empty chair where Elena had sat. He reviewed the data from the last 10 minutes. He found no logical justification for her actions. The patient was dead. The tears did not reverse necrosis. The hand-holding did not restart the heart. It was, by all definitions of the word, entirely useless. And yet, Zyler's internal processors flagged a persistent, low-level anomaly in his own logic gates. He could not delete the image of her crying over the dead man. He filed it under unresolved variables and went to find his supervisor. The Ethelgard were a species that had conquered death by conquering themselves. 3,000 years ago, their ancestors realized that emotion was the root of all inefficiency. Anger led to war. Grief led to depression. Love led to irrational resource allocation. To save their civilization, they underwent the Great Calibration. They genetically and surgically removed the capacity for emotional variance. They became perfect. They became the premier medical species in the galaxy. They did not make mistakes. They did not burn out. They did not cry over dead patients. Zyler was a product of the Great Calibration. He was tall, with pale, hairless skin and large, dark eyes that constantly scanned his environment. His internal biology was regulated by a network of subdermal cooling tubes and synthetic glands. He felt no pain, no joy, no fear. He felt only the steady, comforting hum of his logic processors. He was assigned to the Aegis, a massive joint species hospital ship orbiting a human colony world. The Aegis was an experiment in interspecies cooperation. Ethelgard provided the flawless medical infrastructure. Humans provided the sheer volume of staff and the biological resilience to work in high-stress environments. Zyler's official title was Clinical Efficiency Auditor. His job was to observe, measure, and optimize. His supervisor, Subdirector Vale, was waiting for him in the observation deck. Vale was older, his skin slightly more translucent, his movements even more precise than Zyler's. "Report, Auditor Zyler," Vale said, not looking up from his holographic displays. "The human nursing staff continues to operate at a baseline inefficiency of 32%, Zyler said. They engage in non-medical physical contact. They speak to patients outside of clinical necessity. They experience elevated stress hormones and fail to utilize the decompression chambers." Vale nodded slowly. "I have reviewed the preliminary data. The humans are a chaotic variable. However, their overall patient survival rates are anomalous." Zyler blinked. "Anomalous? Subdirector? Our Ethelgard surgical teams have a 98% success rate," Vale said. "The human medical teams have a 94% success rate. Statistically, they should be lower, given their emotional volatility and physical fatigue. Yet, their long-term recovery metrics and patient satisfaction scores are significantly higher than ours. There is a hidden variable. I have been monitoring them," Zyler said. "The variable appears to be empathy. It is a cognitive recognition of another's state. It has no measurable impact on cellular repair. Perhaps your definition of empathy is incomplete," Vale said. He finally turned to look at Zyler. "I am assigning you a specific task. I want you to conduct a deep dive audit on head nurse Elena Rostova. She is the epicenter of this inefficiency. Shadow her. Record her actions. Quantify her empathy. Find out if it is a beneficial medical tool, or if it is simply a psychological glitch that we need to correct." "You wish for me to prove her methods are flawed," Zyler clarified. "I wish for you to find the truth, Zyler. If her methods are flawed, we will reassign her. If they are beneficial, we will attempt to replicate them in our own Ethelgard staff. Do not let her human charm cloud your logic." "It is impossible for my logic to be clouded, Subdirector," Zyler said. "I do not possess the biological hardware for charm or confusion." "Then proceed," Vale said. Zyler began his shadowing of Elena Rostova the next day. He followed her through the bustling corridors of the Aegis. The hospital was a cacophony of noise. Alarms beeped, carts rattled, people talked over one another. To Zyler, it was a sensory nightmare. He adjusted his auditory filters to dampen the background noise, focusing entirely on Elena. Her first stop was Ward C, a pediatric recovery unit. She approached the bed of a 7-year-old human boy named Leo. Leo had suffered a compound fracture of the radius. Zyler had set the bone himself that morning. The procedure had taken exactly 4 minutes. The boy had been given a local anesthetic. The medical intervention was complete. But Elena did not just check his vitals and leave. She pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. She pulled a small, brightly colored tablet from her pocket. "Hey, Leo," she said, her voice changing. It became higher, softer, more rhythmic. "How is the arm feeling today, buddy?" "It hurts," Leo mumbled, looking away. "I know it does," Elena said. She didn't check his pain monitor. She didn't adjust his morphine drip. She just looked at him. "It's a big hurt, but guess what? I brought something to help distract the hurt." She tapped the tablet. A holographic projection of a small, cartoonish alien creature popped up. It was doing silly dances. Leo watched it. A small smile appeared on his face. "Is that a Krell?" Leo asked. "It's a Glarb," Elena said. "They are from the planet Glarb, and they are terrible dancers. Watch this." Elena spent the next 15 minutes making the cartoon alien dance, making silly sound effects, and asking Leo questions about his favorite foods and his pet dog. Zyler stood in the corner, his datapad recording every second. Time spent, 15 minutes. Medical value 0. Resource cost, high. Finally, Elena stood up. She patted Leo's uninjured shoulder. "You're doing great, Leo. I'll be back later." Leo smiled. "Okay, Nurse Elena." As they walked out, Zyler fell into step beside her. "Nurse Elena, I have a query regarding your interaction with patient 402. Elena sighed, rubbing the back of her neck. "What is it, Zyler?" "You spent 15 minutes engaging in non-clinical conversation and visual entertainment. The patient's bone is set. His pain is managed by automated dispensers. Your presence in the room served no physiological function. Why did you do it?" Elena stopped walking. She turned to face him. "He was scared, Zyler." "Fear is a chemical reaction," Zyler recited. "It is a release of adrenaline and cortisol. It can be suppressed with medication." "Medication suppresses the physical symptoms," Elena said. "It doesn't fix the mind. He is 7 years old. He is in a strange place, surrounded by machines, and his arm is in a cast. His brain is telling him he is in danger. If I just walk in, check a monitor, and walk out, his brain stays in danger mode. His stress hormones stay high. High stress hormones slow down healing. They increase inflammation. They make the pain feel worse." Zyler processed this. "You are suggesting that your conversation altered his neurochemistry." "I'm suggesting that making him feel safe lowered his cortisol levels," Elena said. "It released oxytocin and endorphins, natural painkillers. I didn't just treat his arm, Zyler. I treated his nervous system." Zyler looked at his datapad. He pulled up Leo's biometric history from the last 15 minutes. He overlaid it with the timeline of Elena's visit. His optical sensors widened slightly. During the 15 minutes Elena was in the room, Leo's heart rate had dropped from 90 to 75. His cortisol levels, measured via sweat analysis, had decreased by 18%. His self-reported pain score, logged by the bed sensors, had dropped from a 6 to a 3. It was a measurable physiological change, and it had been triggered not by a drug, but by a cartoon alien and a soft voice. "The data supports your hypothesis," Zyler said slowly. "Your presence acted as a catalyst for endogenous analgesic production." Elena smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "See? It's not magic, Zyler. It's biology. We are social animals. We heal better when we feel connected. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a teenager in room 305 who needs to be convinced to eat his vegetables." She walked away. Zyler stood in the hallway, staring at his datapad. The anomaly was growing. It was not a glitch. It was a mechanism he did not understand. That night, in his quarters, Zyler did not enter his sleep cycle. He sat at his desk and began to build a simulation. If empathy was a biological tool, it could be quantified, could be replicated. The Ethelgard did not rely on intuition. They relied on data. If Elena's methods increased recovery rates by 18%, then the Ethelgard should adopt them. Xyler coded a virtual human patient. He programmed the patient to experience pain and anxiety. Then he coded a virtual nurse. He inputted Elena's exact words, her exact tone of voice, her exact facial expressions, and her exact physical movements from the interaction with Leo. He ran the simulation. The virtual nurse sat down. It said, "Hey Leo, how is the arm feeling?" Played the cartoon alien. It made the silly sounds. The virtual patient's heart rate dropped slightly. But then the patient's anxiety spiked. The virtual patient started crying. The cortisol levels skyrocketed. Xyler stopped the simulation. He frowned, a micro-expression his facial muscles were barely capable of making. He adjusted the parameters. He made the virtual nurse's voice perfectly match Elena's pitch. He matched the exact millisecond pauses between her words. He matched the exact angle of her smile. He ran it again. The virtual patient became more distressed. The anxiety levels hit critical thresholds. Xyler ran it a third time, a fourth time, a 10th time. Every time the simulation failed, the virtual patient felt mocked, or confused, or simply uncomfortable. The physiological benefits were entirely absent. Xyler leaned back in his chair. His cooling tubes hummed loudly, working to dissipate the heat generated by his overtaxed processors. Why did it work for Elena but not for the simulation? He reviewed the video footage of Elena with Leo. He watched it frame by frame. He looked at her eyes. He looked at the microtensions in her face. He looked at the way she leaned forward. And then he saw it. The simulation was perfect in its execution. But it was entirely hollow. Elena's words were just words. Her smile was just a muscle contraction. What the simulation lacked, what Xyler could not code, was the underlying intent. Elena actually cared. The concept hit his logic processors like a physical blow. The benefit did not come from the words or the actions. It came from the genuine emotional state of the nurse. The human nervous system was so highly tuned that it could detect the difference between a performed action and a genuine feeling. The patient's brain recognized the authenticity of the connection, and that authenticity triggered the healing response. To replicate the effect, the nurse had to actually feel the emotion. Xyler stared at the screen. The Ethelgard had removed their emotions to become perfect healers. But in doing so, they had removed the very tool that made human healing so effective. They had amputated a part of their medical arsenal in the name of efficiency. It was a profound paradox, and it terrified his logical mind. The next day, Xyler requested a meeting with Elena in the hospital's botanical garden. It was one of the few places on the ship where the air smelled of soil and growing things, rather than antiseptic. Elena was sitting on a bench, drinking a cup of synthetic coffee. She looked exhausted. The dark circles under her eyes were prominent. "You requested to see me, Auditor Xyler?" she said, taking a sip. "Did I violate another protocol?" "I have been attempting to replicate your methods," Xyler said, sitting rigidly on the opposite end of the bench. "I have failed." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You tried to replicate empathy?" "I attempted to quantify it and reproduce it algorithmically. Failed." The patients became more distressed. Xyler paused. "I have concluded that the efficacy of your method relies entirely on your genuine emotional state. You must actually feel the empathy for it to work." Elena set her coffee down. She looked at him, really looked at him. "That's a very profound realization, Xyler. Most people just think it's about being nice." "It is not about being nice. It is about neurobiology," Xyler said. "But it presents a problem. The Ethelgard cannot feel empathy. We were calibrated to remove it. Therefore, we cannot use this tool. We are medically inferior in this specific regard." Elena smiled softly. "You aren't inferior, Xyler. You just have a different toolkit. We bring the emotional support. You bring the flawless surgical precision. It's a partnership. A partnership requires mutual understanding," Xyler said. "I do not understand it. I can observe it. I can measure it. But I cannot feel it. When I look at a dying patient, I see a failing biological system. When you look at a dying patient, what do you see? Elena looked out at the small artificial sun shining through the glass dome. I see a story that is ending. I see a person who is afraid. I see the weight of all the things they will never do. She turned back to him. It hurts, Zyler. It hurts every single time. But it's a necessary hurt. It's the price of being human. Pain is inefficient, Zyler stated. It impairs function. Sometimes, Elena agreed. But sometimes, pain is the only thing that tells us we are still alive. If you don't feel the hurt of losing a patient, you stop trying to save the next one. The grief is what fuels the compassion. Zyler processed this. His internal chronometer ticked. He felt a strange sensation in his chest cavity. It was a tightness, a slight restriction in his synthetic breathing apparatus. He ran a diagnostic. All systems were nominal. It was a phantom sensation, a ghost in the machine. I am beginning to understand, Zyler said quietly. But I do not know if I can accept it. You don't have to accept it today, Elena said, standing up and picking up her coffee. Just keep observing. The truth usually reveals itself when you stop trying to force it into a spreadsheet. The truth revealed itself 3 weeks later, in the form of patient 814. His name was Elias Thorne. He was 45 years old, and he was suffering from a rare, degenerative neurological condition called Kalin syndrome. His nervous system was slowly breaking down. First, he lost the use of his legs, then his hands. Now, the degradation was reaching his respiratory system. Zyler had reviewed Elias's chart. The prognosis was terminal. The degradation was irreversible. According to Ethelgard protocol, Elias should be moved to palliative care. His pain should be managed with heavy sedatives. He should be kept comfortable until his respiratory system failed. It was the most efficient use of medical resources. But Elena refused to move him to palliative care immediately. She kept him in the active ward. Every day, Elena spent at least an hour with Elias. Since he could no longer speak or move his hands, she read to him. She read him history, science fiction, and poetry. She played his favorite music. She sat by his bed and held his limp hand. Zyler shadowed her during these visits. He monitored Elias's brain waves. When Elias was alone, his brain was a storm of chaotic, painful signals. The neural degradation caused constant, agonizing neuropathic pain. His brain waves were jagged and erratic. But when Elena entered the room, something changed. Zyler watched the monitors in fascination. As Elena sat down and began to read, the jagged waves on the monitor began to smooth out. The pain receptors in Elias's brain, which were firing at maximum capacity, began to dampen. The brain released a flood of natural endorphins. The pain didn't disappear, but it was muted. It became bearable. Elias's eyes, which were usually wide with terror, would relax. His breathing would slow. He would look at Elena, and even though he couldn't smile, the tension in his face would melt away. It was a miracle of neurobiology. Elena's presence was literally acting as a neurological buffer, shielding Elias's brain from the full force of his own pain. One afternoon, Elias's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. His respiratory rate dropped dangerously low. The automated alarms began to blare. Zyler rushed into the room. Elena was already there, adjusting the ventilator settings. His lungs are failing faster than predicted, Zyler said, reading the data. The degradation has reached the diaphragm. I recommend increasing the sedation and preparing for terminal extubation. No, Elena said, her voice tight. Not yet. Let me try to stabilize him. It is futile, Zyler said. The tissue is necrotic. No medication will reverse it. You are prolonging the dying process, not the living process. I am giving him time, Elena snapped. She grabbed a manual resuscitation bag and began pumping oxygen into his lungs. Come on, Elias. Breathe. Just breathe with me. Zyler watched her. She was expending massive amounts of energy. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. She was fighting a losing battle against biology. Elena, Zyler said, stepping forward. Stop. You are causing yourself unnecessary physiological stress. He is gone. The brain activity is dropping below viable thresholds. Elena didn't stop. She kept pumping the bag. I'm not ready to let him go. He is already gone, Zyler said, his voice gentle, though he didn't understand why he was modulating his tone. Your actions are illogical. Elena stopped. She dropped the bag. She looked at Elias's face. The monitors showed a flat line. The brain activity had ceased. She stood there for a long moment. Then, she reached out and gently stroked Elias's hair. She leaned down and kissed his forehead. Goodbye, Elias, she whispered. Thank you for letting me read to you. She turned off the monitors. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the air cycler. Zyler looked at Elena. Her shoulders were slumped. She looked incredibly small. I do not understand, Zyler said softly. You knew he was dying. You knew it was irreversible. Why did you fight the biology? Elena turned to him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Because biology isn't everything, Zyler. Yes, his body was failing. But his mind was still in there. He was scared. He was in pain. I couldn't fix his body, but I could fix his fear. I could make the pain a little less heavy. I couldn't save his life, but I could save his dignity. She walked past him and out of the room. Zyler stood alone in the room with the body. He looked at the empty bed. He looked at the monitors. He felt the tightness in his chest again. It was stronger this time. It wasn't a phantom sensation. It was a physical ache. His cooling tubes were working overtime, but he still felt hot. He accessed his internal diagnostics again. Warning: logic processor overload. Emotional subroutines attempting to initialize. Error. Hardware not present. Rerouting power. Zyler closed his eyes. For the first time in his existence, the cold, clear data of the universe felt insufficient. He realized, with a sudden, terrifying clarity, that Elena was right. Biology wasn't everything. There was a space between the cells, a space between the synapses, and in that space lived something his people had thrown away. The mass casualty event happened on a Tuesday. The Aegis was docked at a deep space refueling station, taking on supplies. Without warning, a massive debris field from a shattered moon, pushed by a rogue gravitational anomaly, slammed into the station. The impact was catastrophic. The station's shields failed. Shrapnel tore through the docking bay and into the lower decks of the Aegis. The hospital was instantly transformed into a war zone. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the harsh, rotating red glow of emergency backups. The air filled with the smell of burnt ozone, copper, and smoke. The deafening roar of tearing metal was followed by the screams of the injured. Zyler's combat and triage protocols engaged instantly. His vision was overlaid with tactical data. He moved through the smoke, his movements precise and fast. Code red, he broadcasted over the internal comms. All medical staff to the main trauma bay. Mass casualty event. Initiate mass triage protocols. You have learned how to be weak, Vale corrected. I am submitting my report to the High Council. You will be recalled to the homeworld. You will undergo a recalibration. Your memories of this anomaly will be purged. You will be made perfect again. Zyler looked at his superior. He felt no fear. He felt no anger. He felt only a deep, profound pity for the empty, hollow creature standing in front of him. I will not submit to recalibration, Zyler said quietly. Vale's eyes narrowed. You do not have a choice. It is an order. I have already submitted my own report to the High Council, Zyler said. I bypassed your clearance. It is titled The Therapeutic Value of Irrational Attachment. In it, I have detailed the neurobiological benefits of human empathy. I have provided the data. I have proven that our current methods are medically inferior when treating human and allied species. I have recommended that the Ethelgard Medical Corps integrate emotional training into our curriculum. Vale stared at him, stunned. You committed heresy. You challenged the Great Calibration. I challenged our inefficiency, Zyler corrected. The council will review the data. They are logical. They will see the truth. Even if they do, you are still compromised, Vale said coldly. You have broken the core tenet of our species. You are no longer Ethelgard. You are stripped of your rank. You are exiled from the medical corps. You are nothing. I am a nurse, Zyler said. He turned and walked out of the office. Zyler packed his few belongings in his quarters. He didn't have much. A change of uniform, his datapad, a small, smooth stone he had picked up on a colony world, just because he liked the way it felt in his hand. There was a knock at the door. Elena walked in. She looked tired, but she was smiling. I heard about Vale, she said. He's furious. He's packing up his things to go back to the homeworld and lobby the council against you. The data is on their servers, Zyler said. They will read it. They will understand. Eventually, maybe, Elena said. She looked at his small bag. So what now? You're exiled. You can't practice Ethelgard medicine anymore. Zyler zipped his bag. I am no longer an Ethelgard nurse. That is true. However, the Aegis is a joint species vessel. The human medical director has the authority to hire independent contractors. Elena's smile widened. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a datapad. She tapped the screen and handed it to him. It was an employment contract. Head of Interspecies Nursing Integration. The human medical director reviewed your report, Elena said. He loved it. He wants you to help us design a training program to teach our new Ethelgard recruits how to not be robots. And he wants you to stay on the Aegis. Zyler looked at the contract. He looked at the salary. He looked at the title. I do not have a rank, Zyler said. I am an exile. You're a pioneer, Elena corrected. Come on, Zyler. Sign it. We need you. Zyler looked at her. He felt the warmth in his chest. It was a good feeling. It was an efficient feeling. He took the stylus and signed his name. The hospital on the Aegis was different. It was still clean. It was still highly advanced. But it was no longer silent. There was music playing softly in the hallways. There were paintings on the walls. The nurses wore colorful pins on their uniforms. Zyler walked through Ward C. He was no longer wearing the stark white uniform of the Ethelgard. He wore the soft blue scrubs of the human staff. He moved a little slower now. He didn't scan every surface for inefficiencies. He looked at the people. He stopped at the bed of an elderly woman who was recovering from a hip replacement. Her vitals were perfect. Her pain was managed. Her physical therapy was complete. By the old standards, she was ready for discharge. But she was looking out the window, and her shoulders were slumped. She looked lonely. Zyler checked his internal chronometer. He had a staff meeting in 10 minutes. He was supposed to be reviewing the new empathy training modules. He looked at the woman. He walked over to her bed. Good morning, Martha, Zyler said, his voice soft and warm. Martha looked up. She smiled, a small, fragile thing. Good morning, Zyler. I'm just waiting for my son to pick me up. He's running late. Traffic in the colony is heavy today, Zyler said. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. Would you like me to keep you company while you wait? Martha's eyes lit up. I would like that very much. Tell me about the Glarb again. Zyler smiled. He reached out and gently placed his hand over hers. They are from the planet Glarb, Zyler said, his voice a soothing rumble. And they are terrible dancers. He didn't look at the clock. He didn't check his datapad. He just sat there holding her hand, talking about cartoon aliens. It was inefficient. It was illogical. It was exactly what she needed. And as Zyler sat in the quiet room, feeling the warmth of her hand in his, he knew, with absolute certainty, that he was finally perfectly healed. The end.